When it comes to gaming PCs, there's a wide range of options available. You could spend $500, $600, or $700 for an entry-level build. You could spend $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 plus on top-of-the-line components. But my recommendation for new builders has always been to aim for the sweet spot, that midpoint where you get yourself enough performance, enough upgradability, and enough gaming prowess to handle whatever AAA title you want to throw at it. So case in point, I'm going to be building a gaming PC today with the parts that you see here. The price is about $1,200 US. This is the October build of the month.
Excellent!
Today's video is brought to you by Micro Center. This is one of my favorite places to buy PC parts. So if you're building or upgrading your PC, I highly recommend making your way down to one of their 25 retail stores in the US. They have consistently competitive prices and an excellent selection of PC hardware and other tech goodies. And they have a custom PC builder on the Micro Center website. Use it to spec out your rig and it will show you parts in store at your nearest location while ensuring compatibility. Then you can pick up in store or have their pros assemble it for you. So click the sponsor link in the description to find a Micro Center near you. A couple quick notes before we go over the parts. There are actually two parts lists down in the video's description. The first is the recommended $1,200 build using most of the same parts I have here today if you're interested in purchasing them yourself. The second list is the parts I'm actually building with today, which swap out a few components here and there and is a little bit more expensive. And that's because I'm not just building this PC for the sake of the build video, I'm building this PC for Eric. You guys know Eric? Probably not. He's one of the technicians who helped with the remodel on my home, and in fact, the floor I'm standing on right now, he helped create. But we are expecting Eric to arrive later today, so let's get this build underway. We have a lovely assortment of parts to work with today, and typically you start with the parts that have the most impact on your performance, which is going to be the processor and the graphics card. The CPU we're working with today is the Ryzen 7 7700, which is a 6-core, 12-thread processor for AMD's newer AM5 platform. Part of the reason we chose this is because it's an excellent CPU for gaming, but also the AM5 platform is a good one, and it also has a very nice potential upgrade path. Whether you want to upgrade the CPU down the line to something like maybe 7800X3D or 7950X if you want to go for more cores and threads, or one of the 3D V-Cache enabled CPUs that AMD has on this platform. And since AMD has promised to support AM5 through 2025, we should expect potentially like a Ryzen 8000 series down the line. I don't want to speculate too much beyond that, but you should have upgradable CPUs further down the road if you so desire. I have the retail box out here for the 7700X, which is the slightly more overclocked version of the 7700. But if you do go with the X variant, it does not ship with a CPU cooler, hence the thin box. The 7700 does ship with a stock cooler, so if you're on a budget, that's a great way to get yourself up and running, since you do need a cooler. If you got the 7700X, for example, you would need an aftermarket cooler just to keep the thing running. Today, for Eric's sake, we are going to be upgrading his cooler from the stock one, and so we're going with the Thermalright Silver Sol 135 Black, which is an air cooler. It's going to have significantly better performance as well as significantly reduced acoustics in terms of noise output versus the stock cooler. These are also quite competitively priced, so this is only about 35 bucks for this one here. They also have an air cooler called the Peerless Assassin, which is also a very good air cooler, and it comes with an additional fan. And that one will often sell for about 50 bucks, but I've seen it go on sale for 40 bucks or even 35 like this one, so keep your eye out for either one. Next we have a graphics card, and for that we have GIGABYTE's Radeon RX 7800 XT. The 7800 XT and 7700 XT are recent launches from AMD's Radeon team, and they've been pretty well received, particularly the 7800 XT. With its $500 MSRP, its 16 gig VRAM allocation, and generally quite capable performance has led it to be one of the more recommended GPUs, I'd say, from the more recently launched ones. And this is actually going to be a surprise. Ta-da! Because the one component that Eric had already pre-purchased for the build that he was already planning when he came and to do my garage floor, and I was like, hey, I build computers, and he's like, hey, maybe you could build mine, was the RX 6800, and he got an Asus TUF version of that. So when GIGABYTE reached out and they're like, hey, do you want to check out the 7800 XT? I was like, you know what? That would be a decent little upgrade for Eric. So Eric, when he gets here, we'll get to reveal that we didn't use his graphics card, We got him a better one, and I think he will be quite happy with that. For the remaining components, we have a 750 watt 80 plus gold rated power supply. I've gone with the EVGA Supernova, and this is actually a power supply that I've had on hand here for quite some time, and I believe it has a sleeved cable kit, so that's another little upgrade that Eric is going to get. Do note that the power supply in the description is going to be a different model than this, but it's still going to be 750 watts and 80 plus gold rated for efficiency. For storage, we have a 2 terabytes Team Group MP34. This is an NVMe SSD. It is an M.22280, so the little stick of gum ones. PCIe Gen 4, and it actually does get up to about 3,000-ish megabytes per second. Reads and writes, I guess writes go up to 3,500. This isn't necessarily the fastest SSD on the market or anything like that, but 70 bucks for 2 terabytes and a 5-year warranty. SSD prices are so good right now. Go buy more storage. To match our Gigabyte graphics card, we have a Gigabyte motherboard. This is the B650 Aero G, which is a very nice, clean looking motherboard. This one's a little bit more expensive than I would recommend for an entry-level build. Although it is B650, which means you can still overclock and everything, socket AM5, so all of the expectations that come along with that. Although it is the correct chipset, B650, which means you can still overclock and everything. The motherboard I have linked in the description is going to be a little bit less expensive than this one, since this one is around 250 bucks. But it does have some nice aesthetic upgrades as well as some nice functional upgrades too, like a 2.5 gigabit NIC. For memory, we have a DDR5 kit. This is DDR5 5600 Flare X5 kit from G.Skill. And one of the reasons AM5 is easier to recommend now than it was, say, maybe 6 months to a year ago is DDR5 prices. They've come way, way down. They're much more affordable. It is much more comparable to what DDR4 was, or still is to some degree. And since this is G.Skill's Flare line, which is made specifically for AMD, it has AMD Expo settings. And lastly, we have the case, the Phanteks Eclipse G300A. I really like cases that are less than $100 and they get the job done. And the Eclipse G300A is a new one from Phanteks this year that definitely meets those criteria. We're gonna go over this more closely in just a moment. So all that said, let's start taking all this stuff out of the boxes. Now that we got everything out of the boxes, let's take a closer look at the case. It's a good thing to do whenever you're building a new PC, just to get an idea of the ins and outs and the what have yous. This is the Phanteks G300A, and we first saw this case at CES actually back in January. And I was interested because I like less expensive cases that get the job done, that have the things that you need and not necessarily too much of things that you don't for a reasonable price. For 80 bucks, you get a tempered glass side panel with this case. They also have some metal strips along the edge, and that's to help engage with the case when you're installing or removing it. Beyond that, you have a pretty standard layout, full-size ATX motherboard mount there. All of the standoffs are pre-mounted. I appreciate that. There's a generous cutout for CPU backplate mounting, and you also have sort of a popped out section right here that does have some pass-through spots for passing your cables back and doing cable management. Not grommeted or anything like that, but does allow you to tidy those up. Here's a look at the back. We have pretty typical I/O knockout expansion slots here. Power supply mounts down there at the bottom. We have one of those external secure things here that is pretty common on smaller cases or cases that are a little bit more budget oriented. Our rear side panel also pops off with a couple captive thumb screws. You can see the actual steel here. Not the thickest steel, but they have rolled it over in a few places to provide a little bit of extra sturdiness and rigidity. And here in the area behind the motherboard tray, they have included some cable tie down points. You got a mount here for up to 3 2.5-inch SSDs most likely. Power supply basement down there at the bottom with some pads for the PSU to sit on. There's a 3.5-inch mount down here as well if you happen to still have a mechanical drive that you need to install there. And then most of your cable management is going to be passed up through this channel right here. So obviously things could get a little crowded back here, but especially if you don't have a hard drive installed, there's a decent amount of space for tucking excess cables down there at the bottom. Popping off the front panel here, we can see plenty of mesh there for airflow. That's also going to filter dust somewhat, and I guess you could just vacuum off the front of this, or you can easily pop that off to clean it. Power supply is up here at the top. That also has a LED that sits behind it. And as you can probably tell, 3 pre-installed fans, and that is one of the nice features of this case. For an $80 case, the tempered glass side panel window, the 3 pre-installed 120mm fans, and those do have RGB. They're all installed as intake here, and that is so that when you have the front panel on, they're going to shine through and look nice and pretty and be somewhat uniform. I'm probably going to leave them in that configuration because it gives us lots of positive airflow. Positive airflow is usually the way to go. Unless you're me building a system a week or two ago for my contractor's nephew, in which case the airflow is negative, which several people mentioned in the comments, but never mind that. Another nice thing about those 3 intake fans is that there's also room up there for a 360mm all-in-one liquid cooler. So we're going air cooling today, but if AIOs are your thing, you do have a decent amount of space up there for that. You can also mount 1 or 2 120mm fans here on the top, and they do include a magnetic dust filter up there for that one. I don't expect that you could do like a 240mm AIO or radiator up there because there's probably not enough clearance with the top of the motherboard. But along with the dust filter for the front, they have also included a dust filter here on the bottom for your power supply. And then for IO up top, you have a single USB Type A, and you do have a USB 3.2 Gen 2 with a Type C connector. So that's another nice to have that you wouldn't always expect with a case that was less than $100. I just got a text message from Eric, and they're actually going to be here earlier than expected, about an hour and a half earlier. So we better get this build underway if we want to have it ready to go by the time they arrive. Let's get the motherboard all set up. We're all plugged in. Power supply switch is on. Power button. Oh, it's partially working. All right, so we do have a BIOS splash screen right there, so that is good. That means the system is basically functional at least. And after it got past, I think, some initial booting, the fans lit up. So that means that I plugged in their LEDs properly, which is good. Those are daisy chained together, and then they come with an adapter for a 3-pin 5-volt addressable RGB header, and that's plugged in right there, so we can sync the lighting with the motherboard once the operating system's installed. CPU fan is spinning. We have one fan up here that's not spinning, but I plugged these fans individually into fan headers on the motherboard. So one of them is plugged in right here. 2 more plugged in along the bottom here, so I'm guessing one of those is just set to like fan stop mode or zero fan mode, so we can probably adjust that in the BIOS to get those spun up as well. I'm gonna get Windows installing those so we can proceed with actually getting the system ready to ship out or hand off to Eric, who'll be here very soon. There's our 2TB SSD, also recognized and working, completely unused so far. We can go ahead and install Windows. Should only take a few minutes. Well, as luck would have it, with Eric only about 15 minutes away, we discovered we have a small hardware issue. And that is, of the 3 fans on the front of the case, the center one appears to have a busted motor. I had those both plugged into 2 headers on the bottom of the motherboard, and the middle fan, as you saw when I first booted up, was not spinning. I've now swapped that to several different headers and tried a few different configurations, and I've come to the determination that LEDs work, so you do have RGB. but the fan spinning is a little bit more important. I want to get that fixed and ready to go for Eric when he picks up the system. And since I don't think I have a replacement fan on hand right now, it wasn't going to be a quick fix. So Eric is going to come back later in the week. I'm going to get the system set up so I can show you guys some nice pretty shots of this finished build. And we'll come back in just a moment with the finale and conclusion of the build of the month for October 2023. All right, so the build is put together. The fans have been swapped out. I have been doing quite a few different things, not just installing Windows 11, but also making sure like the UEFI or the BIOS was updated, making sure Windows updates were run so that all the hardware is recognized and that the drivers are installed. Oh, updated the UEFI BIOS as well. And it's interesting, since this is the Aero motherboard from GIGABYTE, it has a white splash screen. That was unique. I wasn't really expecting that. But then there was the hardware fix that was gonna require me to swap out the fans. Fortunately, I found some Be Quiet Light Wings fans that I had, and these are really nice ones. They have the RGB in sort of a ring around the outside versus the hub in the middle, but since I swapped all three of them, they all still match and they all still shine through the front mesh very nicely. Of course, that involved removing the three fans that were already there, marking the bad fan, because you gotta mark the bad fan so you don't get it mixed up with the good fans, because I did take one of the good fans and relocate it to the rear of the case so we have a little bit of exhaust going along with our three intakes. The Be Quiet Light Wings fan 3-pack comes with a addressable RGB hub so you can plug in up to 6 devices, but addressable RGB devices are daisy chainable. And that's good because I have no idea why, but the hub just was not working. When I finally powered the system on, the fans were all spinning, which is nice, but the RGB wasn't turned on for those 3 front fans. So I eventually decided I'm just gonna bypass the hub. I removed it completely, and then I just plugged the fans in each to the daisy chain, since the motherboard does have 2 addressable RGB headers. One is controlling the fan at the back, one is plugged in daisy chained with these 3 fans in the front. And I once again tried out Signal RGB, which was able to reach out and address everything except the graphics card, because this is a brand new graphics card from GIGABYTE, the 7800 XT. So we're still getting a fairly frenetic RGB dance on the GIGABYTE logo right there. I was able to sync this all up simply by installing the GIGABYTE Control Center software, which I'll be honest, is not my favorite, but they keep updating it, and this actually worked pretty well so far. Since we do have a GIGABYTE motherboard and a GIGABYTE graphics card, we now have a single app that's controlling all of the RGB. Oh, I also activated Windows, which is nice too. So Windows 11 is activated for Eric, and with RGB Fusion, we at least have a few kind of default effects that we can do. So like, yes, if you want the rainbow puke, we can do rainbow puke. We got rainbow. You got like a unicorn just yacked all over this computer right now. Apart from that though, Windows is now updated. Cables are now managed as tightly as I can. It's not the best cable management job that I've ever done, but I did tuck away the SATA cables, the power plugs that I actually plugged in so I could plug in that fan hub, but then I didn't need the fan hub, but then I left that plugged in so that if Eric installs like some 2.5-inch SATA SSDs, he's got those power plugs for them available right there. We gotta go back to single color. Let's see, we can do pink. We can do orange. That's supposed to be orange, orangish, yellowish. That's yellow. It's just a little bit brighter. Blue, of course. A nice teal. Oh, the red. I think this, I'm actually kind of liking the red for this setup for some reason. Red's looking nice for me. But yeah, give me just a moment. Eric should be arriving and we will do the handoff. Nori's making an announcement. Eric's here. Hey, Eric.
Nice to see you.
Thanks for doing my floor and everything.
No problem.
The garage floor. Eric was a great help with that, and he also mentioned, along with his friend Jake, that he's getting into PC gaming, wanted a gaming computer, had actually already bought the graphics card,
right.
So it ended up working out that I could build it. And we actually have a build that goes along with this, if you guys didn't see it, the build of the month video. That's where all the parts and stuff were chosen partially for this, but awesome. We've talked enough, let's go check it out. I have surprises for you too. Here's the system. You already bought the graphics card, the RX 6800. I didn't use your graphics card.
Okay.
I upgraded your graphics card. You are actually rolling with a 7800 XT.
Oh my goodness.
Note the 7 versus the 6.
Yeah, big difference.
Note the XT versus the not XT. Now, because of how AMD kind of shuffled some stuff around, this is a faster graphics card than this one. And it still does have the same amount of VRAM though, 16 gigs and everything. Right. And it's a GIGABYTE versus an Asus, but that does match up with the motherboard since it's a GIGABYTE motherboard.
Oh my goodness. Well, thank you very much.
That's not all, Eric. That's not all. Originally, in the build of the month video, I pitched a $1,200-ish build. This system is actually more towards the $1,400 range because instead of the 7600, which is the 6-core 12-thread, we went with the 7700, which is the 8-core, 16 threads. So better graphics card, CPU with more cores and more threads. You got the Be Quiet Lightwings fan upgrade.
I very much appreciate it. This thing is better than I could have ever imagined.
Also in the build of the month video, I recommended 3 monitors.
Okay.
There is a 34-inch ultra-wide from GIGABYTE, and there's a couple 27-inch high refresh rate monitors. So 2560 by 1440 or 3440 by 1440 is a nice sweet spot to go along with this graphics card setup. So those monitors are also linked in the description below, by the way. And I think that's it. Oh, it's not it. That's not it. Wait. You get to do the honors.
Oh my goodness.
And people always, whenever I build a system and I'm like, it's for a giveaway or something, and people are like, oh, you peeled the plastic and you didn't leave it for the person who's actually going to get the computer. And I'm really glad that since you're actually picking this up in person, that you'll get to do the peel.
I appreciate that very much. Ooh. Oh my goodness. It is beautiful.
All right, well, I'm gonna send Eric on his way. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, hit the thumbs up button. Subscribe to my channel if you're not already. Check out my store. And again, links to all the parts we used today are down in the description. Thanks again, Eric.
Thank you very much.
Bye, everyone.